Tonight, we reveal a machine so extraordinary, it defies science, faith, and everything we thought we knew about time. A device whispered about in locked corridors and cloaked in Vatican silence. Not imagined, not myth, but hidden in plain sight. For generations, the Vatican has claimed to protect the soul of the world. But what if it also guards something far more dangerous? The power to see the past itself. This isn't fiction. This is the Chronovisor, a secret time-viewing device built in silence by priests and scientists, capable of watching history unfold like a film. Every word, every moment, every lie. They say it was dismantled, buried to protect humanity, but others believe it still exists, hidden deep beneath stone and secrecy. Because if you can watch the past, you can control the present and rewrite the future. So before you laugh this off as a bedtime story, ask yourself, what if time was never lost, just recorded? Like the video, subscribe, because tonight we don't just question history, we watch it. Imagine a machine that lets you see the past. Not imagine it, not guess it, actually watch it. Like a movie screen, but powered not by electricity or film, but by something deeper, something more terrifying. What if the secrets of ancient history were not lost but recorded, replayed, and watched by a chosen few behind stone walls, deep inside the Vatican? This is not the plot of a forgotten science fiction novel. It is a real claim, one that has echoed in whispers through the halls of forbidden knowledge for over half a century. Its name is the Chronovisor. In the early 1950s, a Benedictine monk named Father Pellegrino Ernetti quietly made a statement that would shake the foundations of both science and faith. He claimed that a device had been built, a secret project hidden under layers of religious authority and military-level classification. A machine that could tune into the electromagnetic echoes of the past. Not metaphorically, literally. The machine could show you ancient Rome, the crucifixion of Christ, long-lost speeches from forgotten emperors. You could watch them, like turning a dial on time itself. This device, Ernetti said, was created with the help of world-renowned scientists. Enrico Fermi, the father of the nuclear reactor, Werner von Braun, the architect of modern rocketry. 12 minds, gathered in absolute secrecy, working not in some high-tech lab, but under the blessing and direction of the Church. Their goal was not to build a time machine, it was something stranger, something quieter, a window into yesterday. The Vatican, according to Ernetti, immediately recognized the power of the Chronovisor, because if you can watch the past, you control the story. History becomes a film reel, faith becomes programmable, and truth? Truth becomes whatever the machine is allowed to show. The project, he claimed, was eventually dismantled, taken apart, silenced, not because it failed, but because it worked. Too well. Years later, a photograph surfaced. A grainy image of Christ on the cross. Not painted, not drawn, photographed. The Vatican never confirmed it, but they never denied it either. And Ernetti? He retracted his claim. Then, on his deathbed, he said it again. The machine was real. No blueprints have ever surfaced. No video, no parts. Just a story too wild to ignore. And yet, the more you learn about the Church's obsession with time, calendars, and control over history, the less absurd it sounds. A machine that watches time like a film. A device that turns memories into images. A technology that shouldn't exist, but maybe did. The Chronovisor remains a myth, officially. But like many myths, it has a habit of lingering, quietly, in the shadows, waiting for the right question. Waiting for someone to ask, not if it worked, but why it was buried, because if a machine can see time, then time is no longer a mystery. It is a message, and someone has already read it. It didn't begin with a press conference. There was no breaking news alert, no televised reveal. The story of the Chronovisor slipped into the world like a whispered secret from behind cloistered stone walls. A single man, dressed not in a lab coat but in the robes of a Benedictine monk, opened his mouth and told the world something it wasn't ready to hear. His name was Father Pellegrino Ernetti, and what he said would shake the foundations of everything we think we know about time, history, and the power hidden inside the Vatican. It was the early 1970s when the first real crack in the silence appeared. A strange interview surfaced in an Italian newspaper. The headline didn't scream, it almost looked like satire. But the words printed beneath it were deadly serious. Father Ernetti claimed that he had been part of a classified project, one hidden within the halls of the church, to build a device capable of seeing through time. Not fiction, not metaphor. Actual moments from the past, watched in real time like a broadcast pulled from the folds of space. People laughed. At first, but something about the man's demeanour made others hesitate. This wasn't a man chasing attention. Father Ernetti was known for his deep study of ancient music, his work in exorcism, and his contributions to sacred knowledge. He wasn't a showman, he was a scholar, quiet, controlled. A man who had served the church faithfully for decades. So why say something so outrageous? Why risk his reputation? As the interview spread through Europe, curiosity turned to obsession. People began digging. Some found strange connections. Ernetti had ties to high-level physicists. He had studied wave theory, acoustics, and ancient languages. He had access to the kind of minds and materials that could, in theory, attempt something like a chronovisor. And then there was his claim about the team. He said that the device had been built in secret by a group of 12 scientists. Not all of them were religious. Some were famous. One of them, he hinted, was Enrico Fermi. Another was Werner von Braun. Then came the photograph. Grainy, strange. It showed a man on a wooden cross, his face twisted in pain. It was labelled simply as Christ. Ernetti claimed the photo was captured using the Chronovisor during a viewing session of the crucifixion. The image was widely dismissed as a fake, but oddly, the Vatican refused to comment. Not a confirmation, not a denial, just silence. Years passed. Ernetti stopped speaking about the machine. Some said he was silenced. Others claimed he feared what might happen if he revealed more. Then, on his deathbed in the year 2000, he was asked one final time if the Chronovisor had been real. He nodded. Yes, it had existed. And yes, it had been hidden away. What makes his story so haunting is not just what he said, but how he said it. Calm, without drama, as if it was simply a truth too dangerous to say out loud. A whisper from behind cloistered walls, echoing still, before he ever whispered a word about time machines or hidden technology. Father Pellegrino Ernetti lived two very different lives. One in the quiet shadows of a monastery, the other in the dazzling complexity of physics and sound waves. He was not a man most people would expect to be at the centre of one of the strangest stories ever told about the Vatican. But maybe that's exactly why it happened. Born in the year 1925 in Italy, Ernetti joined the Benedictine order when he was still young. Monastic life was quiet, structured, focused on study, prayer, and deep reflection. But even within those ancient stone walls, his mind reached outward. He was fascinated by sound, especially how it could be preserved, distorted, and transmitted. That curiosity led him to study not just theology, but also music and acoustics. Eventually, it took him into the world of physics. By the time he reached adulthood, Ernetti had become something unusual. A monk who could hold his own in discussions about quantum resonance and waveforms. A man of deep faith who also believed in the laws of science. He taught at a university. He worked alongside engineers and physicists. And more importantly, he had access to Vatican channels that most scientists could only dream of. The Church had always been a collector of knowledge. What most people don't realise is that it also housed secret scientific experiments. Not flashy, not public, but very real. Deep within those quiet halls were rooms filled with scrolls, instruments, and sometimes devices that blurred the line between technology and mysticism. Ernetti wasn't just a bystander in this hidden world. He was an active participant. It was during one of his collaborative projects in the early 1950s that something changed. Ernetti later claimed that while working with another scientist on sound harmonics, they stumbled across a theory, a way to detect and reconstruct the electromagnetic remnants of past events, not just echoes in sound, but echoes in time. He brought the idea to the Vatican. Instead of shutting it down, they opened a door. Ernetti says he was invited to work with a small group of elite minds, not just monks, scientists, experts in optics, energy, and magnetic fields. Some, like Enrico Fermi and Werner von Braun, were allegedly involved under the tightest secrecy. Their task was not to invent a time machine, but to build a device that could look back into the past, a viewer, a kind of cosmic recorder, the Chronovisor. As the project progressed, it became clear to Ernetti that this was no longer a simple experiment. What they were seeing, if it was real, had the power to unravel everything: faith, history, identity. And that power, he believed, had to be protected. So the monk who once sought truth through music and physics made a choice. He became a gatekeeper, a guardian of something the world wasn't meant to understand. Not yet. A man divided between science and silence. And it's in that silence where the story begins to turn. Some stories are too strange to be fiction. A secret meeting, a hidden room, a monk surrounded not by priests, but by some of the greatest scientific minds in the world. This is the part of the Chronovisor story that begins to feel almost impossible. And yet, according to Father Pellegrino Ernetti, this is exactly what happened. A project so classified, so far beyond the public eye, that even governments weren't supposed to know. A forbidden collaboration, hidden inside the Vatican. Ernetti claimed the team wasn't just a group of curious monks or quiet inventors. It was made up of 12 people, 12 hand-picked individuals with unmatched knowledge in physics, engineering, and electromagnetic theory. Not all of them were believers. Some were skeptics. But they all had one thing in common. They were brilliant. And they were trusted. Among the names Ernetti hinted at, two stood out like thunder. Enrico Fermi, one of the architects of the atomic age, and Werner von Braun, the German-born engineer who helped America build its space program. To imagine these two men working under the radar, in secret with a Catholic monk, feels unreal. But that's what makes the story so unsettling. Because if it's even partially true, it means there are entire chapters of science that we were never allowed to read. The purpose of their work wasn't to create a weapon. It wasn't about bombs or rockets. Their mission was stranger and much more delicate. They were trying to build a device that could reach through time, not to travel through it, but to observe it. to reconstruct past events using the lingering energy left behind in the universe, like tuning a cosmic radio to catch echoes from a moment long gone. This meant combining knowledge from multiple fields: advanced optics to recreate visual images, sound wave theory to pick up lost voices, electromagnetic calculations to locate specific time coordinates, and theoretical physics to understand how it all might fit together. It was a puzzle made of invisible pieces. According to Ernetti, the project was hosted under the protection of the Vatican, in a space that no outsider could access. They worked in total secrecy. No public records, no announcements, no leaks. Only those 12 men sharing data, running tests, and slowly building what would be known as the Chronovisor. The strangest part was that it worked, or at least that's what Ernetti said. They saw things, moments in history, real events unfolding before their eyes. The crucifixion of Christ, a speech by Cicero, ancient rituals and lost civilizations. They were no longer reading history, they were watching it. But with knowledge like that comes danger, and the group began to realize what they had created wasn't just a machine, it was a threat to religion, to power, to the timeline itself. So the collaboration was disbanded. The Chronovisor was hidden. The scientists went silent, and the world went on, never knowing how close it had come to seeing the past through a screen built behind closed doors. If someone told you there was a machine that could see the past, you'd probably laugh. It sounds impossible, like something out of a science fiction movie. But what if it wasn't? What if such a device was not only possible, but already built, tested, and used behind the walls of the Vatican? That's the claim made by Father Pellegrino Ernetti. And according to him, the machine had a name: the Chronovisor. Unlike a time machine that sends people backward or forward through time, the Chronovisor was designed for something different. It didn't transport you, it let you watch. Ernetti described it as a kind of super television, except instead of showing modern programs or films, it displayed moments from history, real events, real people, not imagined, not recreated, actually happening as they once did, right before your eyes. The way it worked was as strange as the idea itself. The Chronovisor was said to pick up electromagnetic remnants from the past. You see, when something happens, it doesn't just disappear. Every sound, every light wave, every movement leaves a kind of imprint on the universe. These traces float around us, invisible and undetectable to normal tools. But the Chronovisor was designed to find them, decode them, and replay them, like dragging old footage out of the air. Ernetti claimed the device had multiple components: special metals shaped into antennae that could detect specific frequencies, a screen that displayed the images, a control panel that let the user select the moment in time, and speakers that allowed the past to be heard as clearly as if it were happening live. You could watch Julius Caesar walk through Rome, hear Napoleon give orders, witness the building of the pyramids, all without leaving the room. The most shocking claim, though, was what the Vatican used it to view. According to Ernetti, they pointed the Chronovisor toward the 1st century, and what they saw was the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Not a painting, not a church story, the real event, unfolding, raw, unedited. Ernetti even said that they used the device to watch lost performances from ancient Greece and Rome. Entire plays, forgotten languages spoken again. Moments that had been erased from memory were now alive, if only on a screen. The past wasn't gone. It was recorded, like a cosmic surveillance system that had been running since the beginning of time. But, as incredible as it all sounds, the invention came with fear, because if you could watch the past, you could prove or disprove anything. Religious stories, historical battles, national legends. You could expose lies, destroy myths. And that kind of power doesn't just challenge belief, it challenges control. So the Chronovisor, if it was ever real, was never shown to the public. No images, no blueprints, only a few scattered stories and a photograph that may or may not have come from it. An invention that never should have existed, and maybe still does, hidden, waiting, locked away, where time is never truly out of reach. There are some inventions the world hears about instantly. They're shown off at press conferences, written into textbooks, and turned into global headlines. But others are different. Some are kept in the shadows, guarded like dangerous weapons, not because they don't work, but because they do. And that's the story behind the Chronovisor. A device said to be able to watch the past, to view any moment in time like rewinding a film. And yet, most people have never heard of it. The question is why? According to Father Pellegrino Anetti, the Vatican made a decision. After seeing what the Chronovisor could do, they chose to keep it hidden. Not because it failed, but because it succeeded too well. The past, it turns out, was never lost. It was simply inaccessible. Until suddenly, it wasn't. Imagine being able to prove or disprove anything in history, to see the truth behind every religion, every ruler, every war. That kind of knowledge would shake the foundation of society. Governments, churches, even entire cultures are built on the stories they tell about the past. But if those stories could be watched, paused, and questioned, who would stay in power? Anetti claimed that after multiple tests, the Vatican realized the Chronovisor was too dangerous. It could be misused. In the wrong hands, it could become a tool for blackmail, for manipulation, even for rewriting history itself. You could fake events, distort truth, or erase people's faith by showing them something they weren't ready to see. Not everyone wants to know the unfiltered version of reality. Some people need the myth. So the Vatican, according to Anetti, dismantled the machine, took it apart piece by piece, locked away the parts, destroyed the blueprints, silenced the team. Not because they were afraid of science, but because they were afraid of what science could reveal. They decided that humanity wasn't ready. And that silence became part of the story. The Church never officially denied the Chronovisor. They didn't confirm it either. They did something more powerful. They said nothing. Because sometimes, silence protects more than any locked vault. It leaves just enough mystery to make the truth untouchable. There are rumours that the parts were hidden deep beneath the Vatican, in the same vaults where forbidden books and banned manuscripts are stored. Some believe the Chronovisor still exists, disassembled but not destroyed, waiting for a future moment when it might be used again. Or maybe it was only moved further underground, into a place where even popes need permission to enter. What's clear is this: the Chronovisor, if real, was never meant for the public. It was meant for control, to protect the narrative, to guard belief. And in a world built on carefully chosen stories, the most dangerous thing is a machine that shows the truth. Not with opinion, not with theory, but with images, with sound, with proof. That's why the world was never told. Because some truths are too powerful to release, and too dangerous to deny. The idea of watching the past sounds impossible, like something out of fantasy. But what if it's not? What if the past never truly disappears? What if every word spoken, every movement made, and every light that ever touched the earth still lingers somewhere around us, waiting to be seen again? That's the strange science behind the Chronovisor. And it might not be as crazy as it sounds. In school, we're told that light travels fast. Really fast. When you look up at the stars, you're actually seeing them as they were years ago. Some of that light left its source before humans even existed. That's because light doesn't vanish. It travels through space. And in some rare cases, it keeps going forever. Now think about sound. When you speak, your voice becomes a wave. It ripples through the air, bouncing off walls, reaching ears. But even when no one hears it, that wave keeps moving. Fading, sure, but never quite gone. What if those waves could be caught, traced, and played again? The Chronovisor was built around this idea. That sound and light are more than just temporary experiences. They're recordings, not made by humans, but by the universe itself. Every action, every event, leaves behind a kind of imprint, like footprints in wet sand. We just can't normally see them. But what if someone figured out how to detect those footprints? Scientists have long speculated about something called residual energy. It's the idea that intense emotions, powerful moments, even sacred rituals leave behind echoes in the environment. Some believe this explains ghost sightings or feelings people get in ancient places. It's not that spirits remain, it's that the energy from the past is still there, like a faded memory etched into space. Now imagine taking that concept and applying science to it. Advanced sensors, tuned to specific frequencies, machines that can interpret light waves and sound waves so faint they would normally be lost. Technology that doesn't just receive signals, but reconstructs them into images and audio, like tuning into a hidden radio station that plays the past. The Chronovisor, if it really worked, would have needed to use a mix of electromagnetism, optics, and quantum theory. It would have had to isolate the leftover signals of time itself, not to change them, just to watch. Like pulling a thread in the air and revealing a forgotten scene. And here's the twist. We already know some of this is real. Astronomers use light to see what stars looked like billions of years ago. Historians use sound restoration to hear voices recorded on ancient cylinders. We've just never pushed it further. Never asked if the air around us is more than just empty space. Maybe the past isn't gone. Maybe it's everywhere, hidden in the walls, floating in the atmosphere, recorded by nature itself. And maybe the Chronovisor wasn't a leap into fantasy. Maybe it was a quiet step into a truth that's been waiting to be seen again since the beginning of time. There's a strange feeling you get when you walk into an old building. Not fear exactly, but a sense that something still lingers in the air. Like you're not alone, even when no one's there. People call it a haunting. But what if it's not ghosts? What if it's history replaying itself, over and over again, like a broken recording stuck in the walls? That's the idea behind something called residual energy. And it might be the key to understanding how the Chronovisor could even be possible. Residual hauntings are one of the oldest mysteries in paranormal research. They're not like the movies. There's no ghost that talks, no intelligent presence. Instead, these hauntings are like loops. A woman in white walks the same staircase every night. A soldier's boots echo down a hallway that hasn't been touched in 100 years. It's as if the environment is playing back a scene from the past, like a memory burned into the floorboards. These echoes don't respond, they don't change, they just repeat. And that's what makes them so eerie. Now imagine if those echoes aren't just a ghost story. Imagine they're real pieces of the past, left behind by energy we don't fully understand. The theory is simple. Strong emotions, trauma, and repeated actions can leave behind an energetic trace. Not just in the space, but in the very fabric of reality, something that can't be seen or touched, but might be felt, or recorded, or maybe even viewed. Another idea, even older, comes from spiritual traditions across the world. It's called the Akashic Records. Some say it's a kind of invisible library that holds the memory of everything that has ever happened. Every thought, every action, every life. The Akashic field, as some describe it, is like a cosmic hard drive, not made of matter, but of information. And like a book you can read without touching, the right mind or machine might access it. Not just for the past, but possibly for the future too. Modern science has its own version of this strange idea. It's called quantum memory. In quantum theory, particles can hold on to states even when separated by space. Some scientists believe that, on the smallest level, the universe keeps track of everything, not just where things are, but how they got there, the path, the choices, the moment itself. Put these ideas together and a pattern starts to form. Whether it's called a haunting, a record, or a quantum echo, they all point to the same chilling possibility: the past doesn't disappear. It lingers, it repeats, it hides just out of sight, waiting. The Chronovisor, if it existed, wasn't just a machine. It was a bridge into that echo, a way to step into the memories of the universe and press play. And once you can do that, once you realize reality itself might be remembering everything, the question becomes something even more terrifying. Who else is watching? We've been taught to think of time like a straight line. One moment leads to the next. Yesterday becomes today. Today becomes tomorrow. It's always moving forward, never stopping, never going back. But what if that's not true? What if time isn't a line at all? What if it's a place? It's a strange thought. But scientists and philosophers have been asking this question for years. What if time doesn't actually pass? What if we're the ones moving through it, like someone walking through a hallway filled with rooms? You don't destroy the rooms behind you just because you walked past them. They're still there. You just can't see them anymore, unless you turn around. Now imagine if time worked the same way. Every moment that ever happened is still happening. Right now, somewhere, just out of view. You're in your room, you're listening to this video. But in that same space, 100 years ago, someone else sat in silence. 2,000 years ago, maybe there were trees and no buildings at all, and maybe all of those moments are still there, layered, waiting. This idea isn't just fantasy. In physics, there's something called the block universe theory. It suggests that the past, present, and future all exist at once. They don't disappear. They're just in different positions on the block. You don't see them because you're stuck in the now. But if you had the right perspective, you might be able to observe any point in time, not as a memory, but as a place. Think about how we watch stars. Some of the light we see at night left its source millions of years ago. In a way, we're looking into the past, not through time travel, but through distance. If that works for light, why not for other kinds of information? Maybe the energy of moments doesn't vanish. Maybe it stays frozen in space, like photographs waiting to be developed. This would explain how something like the Chronovisor might work. If time is not just passing, but stored, then maybe it can be accessed, not travelled through, but tuned into, like switching channels on a television. Each channel shows a different scene, a different moment, all playing at once, but you only see the one you're looking at. And if that's true, then time becomes something else entirely. It becomes a landscape, a structure, a place filled with invisible doors. Doors that someone, somewhere, might already know how to open. This changes everything. Because if time is a place, then the past isn't gone, it's just hidden. And anyone with the right tools or the right knowledge might be able to see it, walk through it, witness it, and maybe even change how we understand reality forever. There's one moment in history that billions of people believe changed everything: the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. It's been painted, sculpted, written about, and passed down for thousands of years. But no one has ever seen it happen, not with their own eyes, until, according to one man, they did, through a machine that should not exist: the Chronovisor. Father Pellegrino Ernetti didn't just claim that the Chronovisor worked, he said it was used, actually used. And one of the events they chose to observe was the crucifixion, the real one, not a reenactment, not a dream or a vision, but the actual event viewed like a live recording from over 2,000 years ago. According to Ernetti, the moment was selected carefully, not just for its religious meaning, but for what it could prove. If they could see it with their own eyes, it would be the ultimate confirmation that Jesus lived, that he was crucified, and that the Gospels were telling the truth. But what they saw, if they really saw it, raised even more questions. The description was simple: a hill, a cross, 3 men suffering, a crowd watching, soldiers moving without speaking, and at the centre, a man with a crown of thorns. His face not glowing, not angelic, but human, beaten, broken, real. The moment wasn't clean. It wasn't like the paintings. It was raw, bloody, tragic. Then came the photo, grainy, black and white. It showed a man on a cross, his eyes lifted, his body stretched in pain. The image was published in an Italian magazine in the year 1972. The caption claimed it was a photo taken directly from the Chronovisor. It was the first time anyone outside the church had seen what the machine might have captured, and it caused chaos. Skeptics quickly called it a hoax. Some said it looked exactly like a statue from an old church, but others weren't so sure. The expression, the lighting, the strange blur around the edges. It didn't look like a photo of a sculpture. It looked like a moment taken out of time. The Vatican refused to speak on it. They didn't say it was real, but they didn't say it wasn't. And that silence only made the mystery grow. If it was fake, why not deny it? Why let the rumour live? Ernetti stood by his story. He said they had seen the crucifixion, they had captured a glimpse of it, and the image was only a tiny piece of what the machine could do. He hinted that they had viewed other events as well. Moments lost to history, a speech by Napoleon, a tragedy in ancient Greece, a Roman senator declaring war. Scenes that no one alive had ever witnessed, now displayed like a film trapped in the air. Whether you believe it or not, one thing is clear. The idea of photographing the crucifixion is not just about faith, it's about control. Because whoever can watch the past controls the story. And the Church has always understood the power of a story, especially one told with proof. Imagine being able to watch history unfold exactly as it happened. Not just the big events, but the quiet ones, the forgotten ones. Ancient plays being performed in front of cheering crowds. Philosophers standing in the middle of a marketplace, speaking languages no one alive today fully understands. That was one of the most unbelievable claims made about the Chronovisor. That it wasn't just used to look at dramatic moments like battles or executions. It was used to recover the lost words of the past. Entire languages, entire performances. Brought back, not through translation or guesswork, but by watching them happen. Father Pellegrino Ernetti said that one of the most exciting uses of the Chronovisor had nothing to do with religion. it was with literature. In particular, a lost play by the Roman philosopher Seneca. The play was called Thyestes. Historians had known about it for centuries. They had pieces of it, mentions of it, but the full script was gone, lost to time. Until, according to Ernetti, the Chronovisor was pointed at a theatre in ancient Rome, and the play was watched, word for word. Ernetti said he personally transcribed the performance. He didn't guess at the words. He didn't reconstruct them from fragments. He listened, he watched, and then he wrote it all down. The play, he claimed, was in perfect Latin. He released a version of it, but critics attacked it. They said it was fake. The writing style felt too modern. It didn't match what was expected from Seneca. But that's the thing. What if the critics were wrong? What if what Ernetti recorded was so authentic that it actually challenged what people thought Latin was supposed to sound like? Because that's the power the Chronovisor would have. It wouldn't just give you words, it would give you context. You could hear the accents, the tone, the rhythm of forgotten speech. You could see facial expressions, body language, things no textbook could ever fully explain. You could learn how ancient people truly spoke, not just what they wrote down. Ernetti also hinted that they had watched speeches by Roman leaders, that they had heard Cicero, one of the greatest orators of all time, delivering a courtroom defense in his real voice, that they had watched early Christian sermons in languages most modern scholars have only studied from dusty pages. They weren't just translating, they were time-travelling without moving. And this is where it gets even more unbelievable. Because if the Chronovisor could really do that, then it could solve one of history's greatest problems. Every time a language dies, we lose part of humanity's story. But if those languages were recorded in the air, in the energy of time, then maybe they're not lost at all. Maybe they're still echoing, just waiting for someone to tune in. That's what makes this claim so powerful. It turns the past into a living classroom, and it suggests that the most ancient voices aren't silent. They're just waiting to be heard again. There are inventions that change the world. The printing press, the light bulb, the internet. But every now and then, there's a discovery that's too dangerous to share. Not because it doesn't work, but because it works too well. That's what some believe the Chronovisor was, a device that could see through time, watch any moment in history. Replay the truth exactly as it happened. No edits, no filters, just raw, unchangeable reality. And that kind of power doesn't just threaten enemies, it threatens everything. Imagine what would happen if anyone could point a machine at the past, not just to witness grand events, but to uncover secrets, hidden deals, lies told by governments, religious events that didn't go the way the stories said. People in power depend on controlling the narrative. They shape the past so they can shape the future. But the Chronovisor would tear that control apart. It would show the world what really happened, whether we were ready or not. Father Pellegrino Ernetti claimed that the Vatican realized this early on, that once they began using the Chronovisor, they saw things they didn't expect. Not everything fit the official records. Some moments challenged core beliefs. Some revealed mistakes made by heroes. Others exposed truths that could shake entire nations. And in the face of that kind of knowledge, they didn't celebrate. They got scared. Because once you know the truth, you can't unsee it. And not everyone wants that kind of clarity. If the crucifixion didn't look the way paintings show it, if historical speeches were full of doubt or weakness, if the rise of religions, kings, and empires was messier than the textbooks say, then belief itself could start to crack. But it wasn't just about religion, it was about control. Governments could use the Chronovisor to spy on the past of other nations. Corporations could dig into the history of inventions and take ideas that were lost. Criminals could use it to cover their tracks or twist the truth in court. It wouldn't be a tool for peace, it would be a weapon of influence. A way to rewrite power by revealing the parts of history that were never supposed to be seen. And so, according to the story, the Vatican shut it down. Not because they hated science, but because they feared what would happen if the world saw too much. If truth was no longer a matter of faith or research, but something you could press play on, something anyone could use. That's why the Chronovisor, if it was real, had to disappear. It was technology too dangerous to be free. Not because it caused harm directly, but because it shattered the walls that keep society stable. The walls built on carefully chosen versions of the past. The safest kind of history is the kind you can't prove, but a machine that shows everything exactly as it was? That's not history anymore. That's a revolution, one frame at a time. For most of history, people believed the Earth was the center of everything. The stars, the sun, the planets, all spinning around us like a perfect cosmic dance. It made sense. It matched the stories told by religion. It made people feel important. But then came a few voices who said otherwise. Voices that asked questions. Voices that used science. And every time that happened, those voices were punished. Because when faith and machines collide, history shows us something dangerous always follows. In the year 1543, a man named Nicolaus Copernicus published a theory that changed the world. He said the Earth was not the center of the universe, the sun was. And the Earth, along with everything else, revolved around it. It was a simple idea, but it challenged the Church's teachings. And back then, challenging the Church meant risking everything. Copernicus waited until the end of his life to publish his theory. Some believe he was afraid. Maybe he had reason to be. A few decades later, Giordano Bruno took things further. He believed the universe was infinite, that stars were other suns, that planets beyond our own could hold life. To us, that might sound exciting. To the Church, it sounded like heresy. Bruno wasn't just a scientist. He was a thinker who asked questions that couldn't be controlled. In the year 1600, he was burned at the stake, not for violence, not for betrayal, but for ideas. Then came Galileo Galilei, the man who built telescopes, watched the skies, and proved that Copernicus was right. He saw moons orbiting Jupiter. He noticed the phases of Venus. His discoveries were impossible to ignore. But once again, the Church stepped in. They told Galileo to stop, to stay silent, to pretend he hadn't seen what he saw. When he refused, he was put on trial. In the year 1633, he was found guilty of heresy and placed under house arrest for the rest of his life. All these stories have something in common. They show us how powerful institutions react when truth threatens control. It's not just about science, it's about who gets to decide what's real. Because if science proves the Church wrong, even once, it opens the door to more questions. And sometimes, questions are more dangerous than answers. So when Father Pellegrino Ernetti said the Vatican had built a machine to look into the past, people remembered Galileo, Bruno, Copernicus. Because if the Chronovisor revealed things that didn't match the Bible, or if it confirmed stories the Church never wanted to admit, history could repeat itself. Silence, censorship, control. The Church has always walked a tightrope between faith and discovery. Sometimes it embraces science, other times it buries it. Not because it's false, but because it's forbidden. The Chronovisor wasn't just a device. It was a reminder that knowledge can be powerful, but in the wrong hands, it can also be a threat, especially when it tells the truth too clearly. Most people imagine the Vatican as a place of prayer, tradition, and sacred rituals. Gold ceilings, stained glass, rows of candles flickering in quiet silence. But hidden behind the holy walls and ancient libraries is something most visitors never see. A world of science, advanced science. Because while the Vatican may protect spiritual knowledge, it has also guarded something else. Technology, research, experiments most people have never even heard of. And maybe, just maybe, the Chronovisor was only the beginning. Few know that the Vatican owns some of the most powerful telescopes on Earth. One of them sits high in the Arizona desert. It's called the Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope. It looks out into space, studying stars, galaxies, and distant objects that challenge everything we think we know about creation. But this isn't just about curiosity, it's about discovery. The kind that asks questions some might prefer to leave unanswered. There's another observatory in Castel Gandolfo, not far from Rome. Tucked away in the papal summer residence, this facility has hosted some of the brightest minds in astronomy. For decades, Vatican scientists have quietly studied cosmic radiation, stellar movement, and yes, even planetary systems that could hold life. Not just to learn about the heavens, but maybe to protect the Church's story of them. And it doesn't stop there. Rumours swirl about secret laboratories beneath Vatican City. Hidden rooms filled with machines, old and new. Rooms with names scratched off the maps. Places where electromagnetic studies and energy experiments are quietly tested away from public eyes. People say particle accelerators have been used under the guidance of certain church officials. Not massive ones like CERN, but smaller, more focused. Designed not to smash atoms, but maybe to unlock something else, something older. Some believe this is where the Chronovisor came to life. In one of these labs, not in the open, but buried deep underground. A place where science could mix with theology, where ancient scrolls sat beside blueprints, where monks and physicists worked side by side, blending formulas with faith. If that sounds strange, that's because it is. But history shows us the Church has always had a complicated relationship with knowledge. It fights it, it fears it, but it also preserves it. The Vatican archives themselves are like a fortress of forbidden information. They stretch over 50 miles, filled with documents going back over 1,000 years. Locked doors, controlled access. Secrets no outsider is allowed to read. If the Chronovisor was real, the details wouldn't be found in a book. They'd be hidden behind concrete walls, marked only by silence. This is why so many believe the Vatican knows more than it ever admits. It has the money, the connections, and the motive to explore technology in ways that go far beyond what most religious groups would even consider. Because if you could build a machine that sees through time, where else would you hide it, except in the one place where secrets are safe, stories are sacred, and science is anything but simple? When most people hear the word Jesuit, they think of missionaries or teachers, maybe a quiet priest in a classroom, or a figure from history in a black robe. But there's a side to the Jesuit order that most of the world doesn't see. A side that doesn't just teach science, but pushes it, experiments with it, questions it in ways that go far beyond the ordinary. The Jesuits have been at the edge of physics for centuries, and some believe they may have played a key role in the Chronovisor story. The Jesuit order was founded in the year 1534 by Ignatius of Loyola, From the beginning, they were different. They didn't just study scripture, they studied the stars, mathematics, philosophy. They believed that understanding the universe helped them understand God. And so, while other religious groups focused only on tradition, the Jesuits built observatories, wrote textbooks, and became some of the most brilliant minds of their time. By the 17th century, Jesuit scientists were leading the charge in astronomy. They mapped constellations, they studied comets, they recorded eclipses in places most Europeans had never even heard of. In China, in South America, in Africa, their reach was global. But it wasn't just about maps and charts. They were looking for patterns, for meaning, for signs of something deeper in the clockwork of creation. And then came physics. As science grew stranger, the Jesuits didn't turn away. They leaned in. They studied gravity, magnetism, energy. They debated time and space, long before most universities even offered such courses. They understood that truth didn't always look simple, and sometimes the mysteries of the universe needed more than prayer. They needed math. They needed courage. So when Father Pellegrino Ernetti talked about a secret machine that could see the past, some wondered if Jesuits were involved, not just because they had the skills, but because they had the mindset. Jesuits didn't fear science. They used it. Some say they even pioneered forms of metaphysics that blended with quantum theory before the term quantum was ever invented. There's also something else. A long-standing rumour that Jesuit scholars were the first to suggest the universe had a beginning, a single moment of creation, what we now call the Big Bang. And guess what? That theory was first proposed in the 20th century by a priest, a Jesuit-trained physicist named Georges Lemaitre. He wasn't rejected by the church, he was celebrated. All of this shows us something important. The Jesuits have always danced on the edge between faith and discovery. They don't separate science from belief. They search for where the two collide. And if the Chronovisor was built, if someone was going to help turn theory into reality, the Jesuits would be the first to understand how. Because sometimes the ones wearing robes are also the ones writing equations. And in the case of the Jesuits, those equations might just point to something the rest of us aren't meant to see, at least not yet. History has a strange way of repeating itself. Over and over again, someone makes a discovery that could change the world. A new idea, a new machine. A way of thinking that challenges what people have always believed. And instead of being celebrated, that person is attacked, labelled a threat, a heretic. Their knowledge doesn't disappear because it's wrong. It disappears because it's dangerous. And that pattern has followed us for centuries. The word heresy used to carry the weight of death. It didn't just mean you were incorrect. It meant you were a problem, a danger to the system. Something that needed to be silenced before others started asking the same questions. Giordano Bruno was burned alive for suggesting that the universe had no centre. Galileo was locked away for saying the earth moves. These were not crimes. They were ideas. And yet, they were treated like poison. That's the line the church has always had to walk. Faith needs rules. It needs certainty. But science is messy. It doesn't care what you want to be true. It only follows the evidence. So when science starts pulling on threads that hold up the church's version of reality, things get tense, especially when those threads lead to questions no one wants to answer. Now picture the Chronovisor in that context. A machine that doesn't just tell stories from the past, but shows them. No more guessing, no more trusting ancient scrolls. You could literally see what happened. And if what you saw didn't match what you were taught in Sunday school or in textbooks, then what? Do you rewrite the doctrine? Do you admit history was wrong? Or do you do what has always been done? Hide it, deny it, burn it? Father Pellegrino Ernetti never said the Chronovisor failed. He said it was dismantled to protect people. That once the Vatican realized what it could do, they saw it as too powerful. And in the eyes of the Church, power without control leads to chaos. Not just in society, but in belief. Because some truths, once revealed, cannot be recontained. Throughout time, inventions have been buried because they arrived too soon. Devices that produced free energy. Machines that challenged the limits of physics. Books that questioned the shape of the soul. They weren't hidden because they didn't work. They were hidden because they might have worked too well. And when knowledge threatens belief, belief usually wins, not through argument, but through silence, through fire, through the quiet erasing of things that don't fit the story. So, if the Chronovisor was real, and if it was hidden, it wouldn't be the first time. It would simply be another chapter in a long human history of choosing safety over truth, order over chaos, myth over reality. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing in the world isn't a weapon. It's a question with an answer you're not ready to hear. There's a reason stories are told the way they are. Clean, structured, safe. Especially when they're sacred. Religious narratives aren't just about what happened. They're about what people believe happened. And belief is powerful. It shapes cultures, builds nations, starts wars. But belief only works when the story stays untouched. When the past remains a mystery wrapped in faith. Now imagine a machine that cuts through all of that. A device that doesn't care about doctrine or tradition. It only shows what actually happened. No filter. No interpretation. Just reality. That's what the Chronovisor threatened to do. For the Catholic Church, and really for any major religion, history is the foundation. Everything rests on events that can't be repeated. Miracles, prophecies, moments recorded by ancient hands and passed down for centuries. If you change those events, even a little, the entire structure starts to shake. And that's where the real danger of the Chronovisor comes in. Because if it worked, it could replay those moments, not as stories, but as video, as sound, as evidence. And evidence doesn't bend the way stories do. It doesn't allow for mystery. It shows what it shows. Maybe the crucifixion looked different than we imagined. Maybe the people around Jesus weren't the ones we thought. Maybe the timeline is off. Maybe the words he said weren't recorded right. Even small changes could break the spell, could turn divine legend into uncomfortable fact. That's the theological risk. It's not about science replacing God. It's about proof removing the need for faith. Religion is built on believing what you cannot see. The Chronovisor makes it so you can see everything. It removes the mystery. It replaces sacred trust with screens and speakers. And once people start demanding evidence for one miracle, they'll start questioning them all. What about the resurrection? What about Moses and the Red Sea? What about visions, saints, angels, demons? If those moments can't be found, if they don't match the story, then what? Does the Church rewrite everything? Or does it collapse under the weight of undeniable footage? That's why, according to the Chronovisor story, the machine had to be hidden. Not because it was evil, but because it was too honest. It took control out of the hands of the Church and gave it to anyone who could turn a dial. It let people make up their own minds based on what they saw, not what they were told. And for an institution built on guiding belief, that's the most dangerous threat of all. So in a way, the Chronovisor didn't just risk exposing the past, it risked unraveling the present, because once you start watching history with your own eyes, you stop needing permission to believe. And that kind of freedom can be more disruptive than any rebellion. It doesn't shout, it just shows. And once the truth is seen, it cannot be unseen. Why would anyone want to build a machine that lets you watch the past? It's not like you can change anything. You can't stop a war or save a life. You can't warn people or rewrite decisions. All you can do is watch. So why would the Vatican, of all places, go through the effort of creating a device like the Chronovisor? If it's real, then it had a purpose. And maybe that purpose wasn't just curiosity, maybe it was control. Think about it. If you had the power to view any moment in history, you wouldn't just be learning, you'd be verifying, checking to see if what the world believes actually matches what really happened. The Church has always stood on a foundation of events that no living person has seen. The life of Jesus, the martyrdom of saints, the rise of apostles. If you could look back and confirm those moments, you wouldn't just strengthen faith, you'd lock it in. No more doubts, no more questions. You would own the truth. But there's another side to it. The Church hasn't always been trusted. People accuse it of hiding things, twisting facts, and shaping history to fit its own goals. A machine like the Chronovisor could help them protect their version of events. They could say, look, we've seen the past. We know how it really happened. And that gives them the final word. In debates, in theology, in politics. It becomes impossible to argue with them if they're the only ones with access to the ultimate source material. Some even believe the Chronovisor could have been used to validate prophecy. In religious tradition, there are visions of the future and warnings about what's to come. But those prophecies are always cloudy, hard to interpret. If the past is stored in some universal record, maybe the future is too. Maybe the machine could be tuned to glimpse what hasn't happened yet. Or maybe by watching the past, patterns emerge, clues about where history is headed, and the Church, always thinking centuries ahead, could use that knowledge to prepare, or to influence outcomes before they even begin. There's also the matter of legitimacy. Every powerful institution faces pressure to prove its authority. The Church is no different. If the Vatican could pull up moments that show the early Church in action, decisions being made, doctrines being set, they could settle centuries of arguments. Who really had the right to lead? What was actually said? What was never meant to be changed? They could shut down reformers, skeptics, even rival faiths, not with words, with footage. So maybe watching the past wasn't just about knowing, maybe it was about owning. Whoever holds the Chronovisor doesn't just observe history. They command it. They shape how it's remembered, how it's used, and who gets to speak with authority. That kind of power goes far beyond science. It's strategic, political, and deeply spiritual. Because once you see the past clearly, you can use it to control everything else. In the early 1970s, something strange surfaced from the shadows of the Vatican. A manuscript, written in Latin, said to be the complete version of a lost Roman tragedy called Thyestes. But this wasn't just any old discovery dug out of a forgotten archive. According to Father Pellegrino Anetti, the full text of this play was recovered in a way no one expected. He didn't find it. He watched it. Using the Chronovisor, Thyestes was written by Seneca, a Roman philosopher, playwright, and advisor to Emperor Nero. Only fragments of it survived through history. Scholars had always wanted the full version, but no copies seemed to exist. Then Anetti, a Benedictine monk and physicist, claimed he had done the impossible. He said he had witnessed a live performance of Thyestes in ancient Rome through the Chronovisor and transcribed the entire script word for word. He published the text. It was detailed, dark, and written in classical Latin. The story followed two brothers locked in a brutal cycle of revenge. It ended in betrayal, horror, and cannibalism, classic Roman tragedy. But instead of being amazed, most scholars were suspicious. How could a monk suddenly produce a version of a play that had been lost for nearly 2,000 years? Where was the proof? How could anyone confirm his claim? Ernetti insisted it wasn't a forgery. He said he saw the performance take place in Rome in the year 169 BC. He described the actors, the audience, the setting. He claimed he and a team of scientists had used the Chronovisor to tune in to the exact moment in time when the play was being performed, and that what he recorded wasn't his interpretation. It was history captured live. Critics attacked the manuscript. Latin experts said parts of the text didn't match Seneca's known style. Some accused Ernetti of making it up or copying it from other sources. One scholar even claimed to have found parts of the manuscript in a 19th century textbook. But Ernetti stuck to his story until the very end. What made the situation even weirder was the way the church handled it. They didn't fully support Ernetti's claims, but they didn't shut him down either. The Vatican stayed silent, just like they did with the Chronovisor itself, and that silence was louder than words. Before Ernetti died in the year 1994, a confession letter supposedly surfaced where he admitted to faking the manuscript. But even that has been debated. Some believe the letter was forced. Others believe the confession was planted to kill the story. So what do we make of it? Either a monk created an elaborate literary hoax, or he revealed something the world wasn't ready to accept. A lost Roman play, recovered not through archaeology, but through time itself. The Thyestes manuscript remains one of the strangest pieces of evidence connected to the Chronovisor story. A mysterious window into a past most believe is gone. But maybe it isn't. Maybe it's still playing, and someone just pressed record. Father Pellegrino Ernetti was not just a man of science. He was a man of faith, a Benedictine monk who studied exorcism, physics, and ancient music. A strange combination, but that was what made him so hard to ignore, especially when he came forward with stories about a machine that could see through time, the Chronovisor. And for decades, he stuck to his story, calm, confident, unshaken, until the very end of his life, when things suddenly got quiet. By the time Ernetti was in his 80s, the Chronovisor story had become legend. Some people believed it completely, others mocked it as fantasy, but Ernetti never backed down. Every time someone asked, he gave the same answer. Yes, the Chronovisor was real. Yes, it worked. Yes, the Vatican had it. No, it was no longer in use. And no, he could not show it to the public. He said it was dismantled, hidden to prevent misuse. Then, in the early 1990s, as his health began to fade, something strange happened. A supposed deathbed confession appeared. In it, Ernetti allegedly admitted that he had faked the Latin manuscript of Thyestes, that it wasn't recovered from ancient Rome using the Chronovisor, but crafted by him, pieced together using existing sources. A forgery. The media jumped on it. Headlines claimed that the whole Chronovisor story was a hoax, that Ernetti had finally cracked and told the truth. But others weren't so sure, because even in that supposed confession, he never actually denied the machine's existence. He only backed away from the manuscript, and even that was suspicious. For one, The confession was not signed. It was not recorded. It came second-hand, told by someone who claimed to be close to him. His family said he never said such things. Some researchers suggested that the church pressured him to retract his claims, even if only partially, to protect its image. A few even believed that the confession was completely fabricated. What makes this more mysterious is that Ernetti never gave a public final interview. He never addressed the growing controversy around his manuscript or the Chronovisor again. In his final months, the man who once stood so boldly behind his claims went silent. A strange kind of silence. Not ashamed, not apologetic, just quiet. And maybe that silence was the answer. Maybe he had seen things he could not unsee. Maybe he had said too much. Maybe someone reminded him that some truths are not meant for the public. That history, when seen without filters, is not just information. It is power. The kind of power that gets locked away. Ernetti died in the year 1994. He took the full truth with him. Whether the Chronovisor was a real device or just a carefully woven myth, we may never know for sure. But the way he carried the secret to his grave, the strange mix of confidence and quiet still, haunts the story. Because sometimes what a person doesn't say is louder than anything they ever did. The Chronovisor may be the most famous machine that officially doesn't exist. There's no blueprint, no photos, no official confirmation. And yet, its legend has echoed through books, movies, and conspiracy circles for decades. It's become more than a mysterious invention. It's become a symbol of hidden knowledge, of forbidden technology, of the idea that somewhere, behind closed doors, people are watching moments no one else is allowed to see. It started slowly. After Father Pellegrino Ernetti's claims in the 1970s, the idea of a device that could view the past began to spread. Not just in fringe magazines or quiet interviews, but in pop culture. Writers picked it up. Filmmakers hinted at it. Soon, the Chronovisor was no longer just a strange Vatican rumour. It had become part of the conspiracy universe. In science fiction, the idea of seeing the past is irresistible, not changing it, not travelling through it, just observing, quietly, like a ghost with a remote control. You can find versions of the Chronovisor in stories where people build secret viewers or tap into hidden timelines. Shows like Doctor Who and Fringe play with similar ideas. Machines that let you look back at events exactly as they happened. It's not time travel in the traditional sense. It's surveillance. But across history, even big movies have borrowed the concept without naming it. Think about scenes where characters use advanced tech to view crimes, forgotten battles, or lost memories. The inspiration often points back to the same core idea that everything is recorded somewhere, in energy, in space, in time, and that someone has figured out how to watch it. Books have gone even deeper. Some fiction writers have included machines eerily similar to the Chronovisor in their plots. A few authors have even used the actual name, weaving it into global conspiracies involving the church, secret science, and the rewriting of history. The moment the Chronovisor entered the world of storytelling, it became bigger than the original claim. It became a myth that refused to fade. Then came the internet, and everything changed. Forums, blogs, and YouTube channels started digging into the story. Some tried to debunk it, others doubled down. They claimed the machine was still being used, that governments had versions of it, that modern surveillance tech might be based on Chronovisor principles. People posted diagrams, unverified photos. Whispered interviews with supposed insiders, the line between fiction and belief started to blur. What makes the Chronovisor so powerful in the world of media is not proof, it's possibility. It taps into something deep. The fear that we're being watched, the curiosity about what really happened long ago, and the suspicion that someone knows more than they're telling us. In the end, it doesn't matter if the machine was ever real. Its story has taken on a life of its own. A secret that became a legend that became a symbol, and a symbol that continues to flicker through our screens, our stories, and our imaginations. Like a transmission from the past we're still trying to tune in. There's something strange that keeps happening around the Chronovisor story. A pattern, quiet, unsettling, and hard to ignore. People who get too close either vanish, change their story, or fall completely silent. It's like the closer someone gets to the truth, the faster they disappear. Not always in a dramatic way. No big explosions or secret agents, just silence, a missing person, a retracted interview, a mind that suddenly forgets what it once swore was real. It started with the scientists. Father Pellegrino Ernetti claimed that 12 men helped build the Chronovisor, 12 of the most brilliant minds of the 20th century. Two names stood out: Enrico Fermi, who helped develop the atomic bomb, and Wernher von Braun, the rocket scientist who led NASA's Apollo program. These weren't small-time thinkers. They were world changers. But no records exist of them ever speaking about the Chronovisor. No interviews, no notes, nothing. If they were involved, they took the secret to their graves. Other names, less known, have surfaced over the years. Priests, mathematicians, engineers, people who were close to the Vatican or involved in obscure physics research. And what connects many of them is that they either suddenly resigned from their positions or completely changed the way they spoke about their work. One man, a Jesuit astronomer, was said to be investigating the claims quietly. Then he left his post and moved into private seclusion without explanation. Another researcher, who tried to publish a book on the Chronovisor, reportedly burned the only copy of his manuscript after receiving a letter he never showed anyone. He told a friend it wasn't worth the risk, and then he stopped talking altogether. Even Father Ernetti's own story was full of strange twists. For years he gave confident, detailed accounts of how the Chronovisor worked, what he saw, who helped him. But in his final days, everything became foggy. People close to him reported mixed messages, that he was pressured, that he wanted to tell more but couldn't, and that he feared for what would happen if the truth ever came out. One Italian journalist who tried to dig deeper into Ernetti's claims vanished for nearly 2 years. When he returned, he refused to talk about the investigation. He changed careers completely, moving from investigative reporting to sports writing. When asked why, he gave a strange smile and said, "Some doors aren't meant to be opened." Some people say it's all coincidence, that secrets like this attract wild rumours, but others aren't so sure. The Vatican has a long history of keeping sensitive information locked away. If the Chronovisor ever existed, the Church would have every reason to protect it, and to keep those who get too close from speaking too loudly. What makes it all more chilling is how quiet these disappearances are. No one ever says the word threat. No one ever files a report. They just fade, or change, or go quiet forever. And in a story about a machine that sees the truth, silence might be the loudest clue of all. There's a reason the Vatican's archives are locked behind walls thicker than most bank vaults. Inside those endless corridors of scrolls, manuscripts, and forbidden knowledge are stories most people never get to read. But every now and then, whispers escape. Tales of inventions that don't belong in their time. Devices that seem too advanced for the era they came from. And the Chronovisor isn't the only one. It might just be the tip of the iceberg. Over the years, researchers have come across strange mentions buried in ancient church documents. Devices described in old Latin texts that sound like modern machines. A mirror that doesn't just reflect light, but shows faraway places. A lens used by monks in the 14th century that supposedly allowed them to read scrolls sealed inside containers without opening them. Too strange to be real, maybe, but too specific to ignore. One of the most famous stories involves the Codex of Voynich. While not officially confirmed to be from the Vatican, this strange manuscript has been tied to church collectors for centuries. It's filled with illustrations of plants that don't exist, written in a language no one can translate. Some believe the codex was created with help from a forgotten device, a machine that translated thoughts directly into symbols. Not speech, not writing, but pure meaning. If true, it would suggest the Vatican had access to neural tech long before the word neural even existed. Then there are the time anomalies. Records of clocks, calendars, and astronomical charts from the medieval era that show knowledge of star movements and planetary cycles with eerie accuracy. Accuracy that shouldn't have been possible without telescopes and computers. But these records exist. Not in science labs, in cathedrals, in monastery libraries. Why would monks have access to data that required instruments hundreds of years ahead of their time? And there's the story of the mechanical angel. Found in the private notes of a 15th century bishop, it was said to be a small statue powered by a combination of magnets and water flow. It could move its arms, bow its head, even speak single words. It was dismantled and hidden after the bishop was accused of heresy, but detailed sketches survived. Some engineers who've seen them say the mechanics could actually work, that it wasn't magic, it was robotics, centuries too early. Many of these tales were written off as metaphor or misunderstood art, but when viewed alongside the Chronovisor, a new pattern begins to form. What if the Vatican hasn't just been a guardian of spiritual truth, but of technological secrets? Inventions discovered by accident or delivered by minds far beyond their time. Inventions that could change how we see the past, the present, and even reality itself. The idea of lost tech isn't new, but when those machines are buried not by time, but by choice, the question becomes bigger. Who decides what technology the world is allowed to have, and what else is still hidden behind the locked doors of the smallest country with the deepest vaults? History is supposed to follow a straight line. One event leads to another, piece by piece, like a puzzle coming together. But what if some of those pieces don't fit? What if there are objects that seem to come from the wrong time? Not just strange or mysterious, but impossible. Coins with faces of kings that didn't exist yet. Relics with carvings from eras that hadn't begun. Writings that reference people centuries ahead of their time. These are what some call temporal artifacts, and some believe the Vatican has been collecting them for longer than anyone realizes. The idea sounds like science fiction, but it starts with very real discoveries. Take the coin found in the ruins of an old monastery in Spain. It was dated to the 12th century, but the face on the coin looked shockingly modern. Clean lines, a symbol that didn't match anything from that period, and on the edge, a strange inscription written in Latin that scholars couldn't fully translate. Some said it was just an artist's mistake, others weren't so sure. The coin vanished shortly after being sent to a private collection rumoured to be owned by the church. Then there's the mysterious cross, kept in a locked case at a small cathedral in southern Italy. Local legend says it was discovered during a renovation in the 1930s. It was made of materials not native to the region and had markings that didn't match any known Christian symbols. Some experts believe the design resembles constellations that won't align in that exact pattern for another 1,000 years. Astronomers who looked into it called it a curiosity. The church called it sacred and refused further study. In the Vatican's own archives, there are texts said to describe events hundreds of years before they happened. One scroll references the discovery of the Americas, but it was written in the late 12th century. Another talks about a black sun rising in the east, a phrase eerily similar to language used during 20th century wars. None of the texts are available to the public. The only clues come from researchers who were granted brief access and then denied it forever after. Some believe these artifacts are proof of time travel, that someone, somewhere, has been slipping through moments and leaving behind evidence. Others think they're glitches, mistakes in the record of time. Like history is a program, and every now and then, it skips a frame. The Vatican remains silent, as always. But it's worth asking why so many of these anomalies end up in their hands. Are they just collecting oddities, or are they hiding pieces of a puzzle that could break our understanding of the past? And if the Chronovisor was real, could it have been used not just to watch time, but to reach into it, to pull something out? Whatever the answer, the pattern is hard to deny. Objects that don't belong, stories that shouldn't exist, and the quiet hands of an ancient institution holding them all behind closed doors. What if history isn't just something that happened? What if it's something that's shown to us in pieces, chosen carefully like scenes from a movie? If the Chronovisor was real, and if it really allowed someone to watch the past, then another possibility opens up. A darker one, because if you can watch the past, you can decide what to show, what to hide, what to emphasize. In that way, history becomes more than a record. It becomes a script. Think about it. Every story you've ever been told about ancient events comes from someone. A writer, a teacher, a priest, a historian. And those people had to rely on second-hand information. Documents, paintings, letters. But what if there was a machine that showed them exactly what happened? Suddenly, whoever controlled that machine would hold the ultimate version of the truth. They could show you Julius Caesar's final words, or the real face of Cleopatra, or what Jesus actually said on the cross. Not just tell it, show it. But there's a catch. The person operating the machine would also choose what moments to reveal, what angle to show it from, what part to leave out. And just like that, the past stops being neutral. It becomes edited, shaped, framed, not because the truth changed, but because the presentation did. That's what makes the Chronovisor so dangerous in theory. It offers perfect clarity, but only for those allowed to look. The Vatican, according to Father Renetti, dismantled it to keep that power from being abused. But what if they didn't dismantle it completely? What if they kept using it, not to share, but to decide? To decide which parts of history stay in the light and which disappear into the dark. This isn't just about ancient events either. If the past can be accessed like video footage, then every political deal, every betrayal, every revolution can be reviewed. And more importantly, it can be controlled. People trust the past because they think it's done, fixed, untouchable. But if it can be observed, it can be shaped in subtle ways, not rewritten, replayed selectively. The idea sounds like science fiction, but it's not that different from how modern media works. News shows choose which clips to air. Directors cut scenes to tell a specific story. Even your social media feed is a version of reality picked for you by algorithms. Now, imagine that kind of filtering applied to all of human history, with one machine, in one place, guarded by an institution with thousands of years of experience in protecting its narrative. This is why so many believe the Chronovisor wasn't destroyed. It was simply hidden. Not because it was evil, but because it was too effective. Because once you start showing people exactly what happened, they stop asking questions. They accept what they see. And whoever controls that machine controls more than the past. They control the present. They shape the future. They become the director of reality. And the rest of us? We're just watching the story unfold. Memory is a tricky thing. Even in your own life, you don't remember everything, just flashes, important moments, feelings. And sometimes, the parts you forget are just as important as the ones you keep. Now imagine having the power to choose which memories stay and which ones vanish. Not just for yourself, but for the entire world. That's the kind of power the Chronovisor might give. A way to not only see the past, but to decide what part of it gets remembered. If you could watch any moment in history, where would you look? Most people would go to the big events, the fall of Rome, the signing of the Declaration of Independence, the death of Jesus. But that's the thing, those events are already well known. They've been written about, painted, preached. So what happens when someone chooses to only show those parts over and over again? It creates a kind of loop, a version of history that feels complete, but is really just a highlight reel. And the parts that get left out, they disappear. Not because they didn't happen, but because no one is watching them, no one is remembering. That's the power of selective memory. It's not just about what's seen, it's about what's ignored. And when you control what gets remembered, you control what people believe is true. This is where the Chronovisor becomes more than just a viewing device. It becomes a filter, a gatekeeper. If the Vatican or anyone else used it to look into the past, they would be faced with choices. Which moments to focus on, which ones to study, which ones to bury, and over time, those choices would start to shape how the world understands history itself. Think about all the people who were forgotten. Inventors whose ideas were never written down. Artists whose work was destroyed. Entire cultures that vanished without a trace. If the Chronovisor could see them, but no one chose to watch, then they stay lost. Their stories fade, while others are shown again and again like reruns on a loop. And it's not always about covering up something bad. Sometimes it's just about control, about keeping the message simple, predictable, safe. If the past is messy, complicated, filled with contradictions, then people start asking questions. They start wondering what else might be hidden. But if you only show the clean parts, the parts that match the official version, people stop looking deeper. This is why selective memory is so powerful. It feels like truth, but it's really just choice. And if the Chronovisor exists, someone out there has been making those choices for decades, picking which moments to reveal and which ones to forget. And the rest of us are left with a version of history that may be more edited than we realize. Because in the end, what we remember shapes who we are, and what we forget, that shapes who we never get to become. There's something strange about how knowledge shows up in history. It doesn't drip out slowly or rise up naturally. It explodes. Whole centuries of silence followed by sudden bursts of genius. Like someone flipped a switch, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, periods when humanity seemed to wake up overnight. Art, science, math, philosophy, all blooming at the same time. But what if that didn't happen by accident? What if those movements were not awakenings, but planned events? What if they were controlled revelations? It sounds wild at first. The idea that entire eras of progress might have been staged. But take a closer look. The Renaissance, which began in the 14th century, seemed to revive ideas from ancient Greece and Rome that had been buried for over 1,000 years. Books, blueprints, philosophies, lost and then suddenly found. But who found them, and why then? Many of those texts were recovered by monks and scholars working inside church libraries. Translations of ancient works were funded and filtered by religious institutions. It was not a random discovery. It was a guided one. Only certain ideas were brought forward. Ideas that supported the structure of power while appearing to push the boundaries of thought. The Enlightenment is even stranger. In the 17th and 18th centuries, new ways of thinking spread like wildfire across Europe. Democracy, freedom, science, reason. It was like the world suddenly got smarter. But again, the movement had a pattern. It was clean, almost too perfect. As if someone had decided what truths were finally safe to share. Now, imagine a machine like the Chronovisor sitting in the shadows, a device that could show the past in full clarity. Suddenly, the people in power wouldn't have to guess. They could choose. They could look back and study what worked and what failed, and then decide when and how to release that information to the world. Not all at once, just enough to guide humanity in a certain direction. This changes everything. The Renaissance would no longer be a rediscovery. It would be a rollout, a calculated release of ancient knowledge, carefully timed to look like a miracle. The Enlightenment wouldn't be a spark of genius. It would be the next phase of the plan. Give the people just enough freedom to feel like they're in control, but not enough to threaten the deeper structure. There are already theories that suggest some historical figures may have had access to information far beyond their time. People who seemed to know too much, who made discoveries that didn't match the tools they had. Maybe they were chosen, given pieces of the truth to push the timeline forward, to play their part in a much older script. So what if history didn't unfold the way we think? What if progress wasn't natural but managed, controlled from the shadows, guided by those who had the ability to see what no one else could? And what if they're still guiding us? Quietly, carefully, one staged revelation at a time. In religion, time is everything. It's the calendar of miracles, the countdown to prophecy, the proof that a moment mattered. Sacred texts are filled with dates and ages and divine events that change the course of the world forever. But what happens if time itself becomes something you can look at? Not guess, not believe, but see. If the Chronovisor is real, and if it truly shows the past with perfect accuracy, then it does more than shake science. It gives religion the ultimate tool, because if time can be observed, it can be claimed, and once it's claimed, it can be rewritten into doctrine. This is where the power gets scary. Most faiths are built on stories passed down from generation to generation, but those stories are fragile. They depend on memory, language, and tradition. What if someone had the ability to go back and check them? Watch a prophet speak. See a holy war unfold. Witness a vision that changed the world. Whoever has that ability would no longer be just a follower of faith. They would be the editor of it. Imagine a church that doesn't just interpret scripture, but verifies it. That can pull up exact moments in time and use them to settle every debate. every split in doctrine, every rival religion. All they would have to do is say, "We saw it. This is what happened." And just like that, belief becomes fact. Not open to question, not built on trust, but locked in by footage. This turns time into something more than a sequence of events. It becomes a weapon, a way to shut down opposition, a way to reshape narratives. Because once you can show the past, you can also decide what to leave out. You can remove the inconvenient parts, highlight the victories, blur the losses. The Bible isn't rewritten. It's just reinterpreted with the help of new discoveries. Discovered through a machine that no one else can access. This level of control wouldn't just affect religion, it would affect everything. Law, education, politics. If the church could prove it has access to the original events of history, who would dare question its authority? They could say they are not just speaking for God. They are speaking with proof from the very moments where his hand touched the earth. And here's the most chilling part. They wouldn't even have to lie. The Chronovisor, if real, doesn't create fake memories. It shows what really happened. But just like a camera, it only shows what's in frame. It only records what someone chooses to point it at. So the story is still theirs to tell, just with a new kind of holy evidence behind it. In that world, time becomes sacred all over again. Not just as something remembered, but something owned. And when religion holds time itself in its grip, it doesn't just preach to the present. It controls the past, shapes the future, and stands in a position no power in history has ever held before. Not just the keeper of faith, but the guardian of time. If you had a machine that could see into the past, where would you look first? Would you rewind a few decades to see what really happened in a war? Or would you go further, into the shadows of ancient legends? That's the question at the heart of the Chronovisor story. Not just if it worked, but what it might have shown. If the Vatican really used it, then there's a good chance they saw things the rest of the world can only dream about, or fear. One of the biggest theories is that they used the Chronovisor to look for Atlantis. Not the version with glowing crystals and sci-fi cities, but the real one. The advanced civilization described by Plato in the 4th century BC, a place that supposedly vanished in a single day and night of disaster. Scholars have debated for years whether it was just a myth or based on something real. But if the Chronovisor could lock onto ancient moments, the truth wouldn't be hidden anymore. Imagine watching Atlantis before it sank, seeing its streets, its people, its technology. That kind of discovery would shake every historical timeline. And if the church saw it first, they would have every reason to keep it quiet. Then there's early Christianity. The life of Jesus has always been central to the church's power, but almost everything we know comes from written accounts made decades after his death. What if someone pointed the Chronovisor at the exact moment of the crucifixion, or at the Sermon on the Mount, or at the resurrection itself? That would be more than historical confirmation. It would be proof. Or worse, it could be something that doesn't match the version we've all been told. If that happened, the church would face a terrible choice: reveal the truth or protect the story. Lost civilizations are another possibility, places we only know from ruins and legends. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, the Indus Valley, the Olmecs in Mesoamerica. People who seem to rise and vanish before history even started recording. If the Chronovisor could peer back that far, maybe the Vatican saw things that rewrote the origin of civilization. Maybe they witnessed a time when human knowledge was far more advanced than we've been taught to believe, a time erased by disaster or war or silence. Some believe they even looked into moments we would call mythical: the Great Flood, the building of the pyramids, encounters with beings not of this earth. If the universe stores light and sound like imprints in space, then no story is too far-fetched to be seen. But the deeper the Vatican looked, the more dangerous the discoveries would have become. Not because they were fake, but because they were real. What the Chronovisor revealed might never be known. Maybe it showed history exactly as we believe it happened. Or maybe it cracked everything open. Either way, it's not hard to understand why those visions would be hidden. Because once you see the truth behind the curtain of time, you can never look at the world the same way again. There's a strange question hiding at the heart of the Chronovisor story. A question bigger than whether the machine was real. Bigger than the Vatican. Bigger than any conspiracy. It's the question of truth. Not just how much of it exists, but whether we should always chase it. If you had the power to see the past exactly as it happened, would you use it? Should you use it? Or is there a line that even knowledge shouldn't cross? At first, it seems obvious. Of course, we should know the truth. Why wouldn't we want to understand history fully, without guesswork or lies? Imagine solving every mystery, finding out what really happened to lost civilizations, watching famous speeches or battles unfold in real time. There would be no more debates, no more fakes, just facts, clean, unfiltered, absolute. But that's where the danger begins. Because the truth, as powerful as it is, doesn't always heal. It can also hurt. It can destroy the stories people build their lives on. Think about someone who believes deeply in a sacred event. What happens if the Chronovisor shows that event didn't happen the way they were told? What if it looks different? What if it never happened at all? That kind of truth doesn't just challenge faith, it can rip it apart. And it's not just religion. Imagine watching historical heroes act in ways that go against everything we admire about them, or discovering that certain events were not brave struggles but brutal mistakes. These aren't just moments, they are foundations. They shape how we see ourselves, our nations, our culture. What happens when those foundations crack? There's also the question of privacy. If everything that ever happened is recorded in the fabric of space and time, then nothing is truly gone. Not just the big events, not just ancient empires, but small, personal moments, conversations, secrets, things people believed were lost to time. With a machine like the Chronovisor, those moments could be replayed, studied, used, maybe even exploited. That leads to a deeper fear. Who decides what is watched, and why? If only a few people control the Chronovisor, they get to choose what truths to reveal and what to keep hidden. They become the editors of reality, the gatekeepers of memory. And that kind of power, no matter who holds it, always comes with risk. So we're left with a choice. Do we open every door, no matter what's behind it? Or do we accept that some mysteries are part of what makes us human? That not knowing everything gives space for belief, imagination, and healing? The Chronovisor, if real, forces us to face that question. Not just can we know, but should we know? And in a world obsessed with truth, it might be the one mystery that's better left untouched. Not because the truth is wrong, but because sometimes what we do with it matters even more than the truth itself. If the Chronovisor ever existed, then it had to be somewhere. Built, touched, used. Not just an idea in someone's mind, but a real machine, powered by circuits and science and silence. So where is it now? That's the final mystery. The Vatican has never confirmed anything. No press releases, no documents, no pieces on display, but behind the wall of denial, are rumours, quiet claims, shadowy hints that maybe the machine wasn't destroyed at all. Maybe it was hidden. Somewhere deep. Somewhere only a few are allowed to see. Father Pellegrino Ernetti said the Chronovisor had to be dismantled, that it was too powerful, too dangerous. He claimed it was taken apart and its pieces locked away to prevent misuse. But he never said where. He never gave names. And no one has ever found any proof of this dismantling. No scraps, no diagrams, no photos, just words, carefully chosen, repeated over the years like a line from a script. But others have whispered a different version of the story, one where the Chronovisor was never dismantled, not fully, maybe it was taken apart, but only to hide it better. Each piece stored in different locations across Vatican territory. Maybe the machine was rebuilt secretly, improved, hidden not to destroy it, but to keep it safe, to keep it sacred, like a relic too holy to be seen by ordinary eyes. Some believe it's buried in the Vatican secret archives, a place more secure than any bank vault. Hidden beneath the Vatican Library, the archives hold thousands of years of documents the public is not allowed to read. You need special permission to enter. Even then, you can only request specific texts. You can't just browse. It's like the past is being protected from curious hands, or from those who might accidentally stumble on something they were never meant to know. Others think the Chronovisor isn't even in Vatican City anymore, that it was moved, maybe to a remote monastery, maybe to an underground lab beneath one of the Vatican's observatories. There are whispers that parts of it were relocated during the Cold War, that only the Pope and a handful of scientists know where it is, and that it is still used today. Not every day, not publicly, but in moments of crisis, moments when the Church needs answers only the past can give. There's also the chance that the machine never really worked, that it was more symbol than substance. A story told to remind us that some truths are too big for the world. If that's the case, then the Chronovisor never needed to be hidden. Its power came not from what it did, but from what it made us imagine. But if it was real, and if it was used, then someone still knows where it is. A machine that sees time doesn't just vanish, it waits, quietly, behind locked doors, buried in darkness, protected by people who believe the past is better left unseen. And maybe, just maybe, it's still watching, still waiting, hidden in the silence of the most powerful place on earth. The world today is running on something that feels almost magical. Artificial intelligence. Machines that can talk, create, learn, and even think in ways that used to only exist in science fiction. AI is everywhere now, quietly shaping what we see, what we believe, and even what we remember. But here's a wild thought. What if AI is also the path to something much older? Something hidden? Something legendary? What if AI could one day do exactly what the Chronovisor was said to do? The idea sounds impossible, but so did everything about the Chronovisor. A device that could tap into the leftover energy of past events, that could reconstruct scenes from thousands of years ago, using echoes of sound and light still floating in the universe. Back in the 1950s, this sounded like pure fantasy. But today, we have AI that can recreate human voices from just a few seconds of audio. Systems that can turn blurry photos into high-definition portraits. Algorithms that scan patterns in the stars, in weather, in DNA, and predict what comes next with eerie accuracy. Now imagine combining all of that with the data we already have. Satellites record everything. Phones track movement and sound. There are cameras on almost every corner of modern cities. If you fed that into an AI system, it could begin to build a timeline of real-world events. But what if you went even further? What if you trained AI to recognize ancient patterns, to map ruins, to read ancient languages, to simulate what the world looked like based on erosion, starlight, and weather records? Suddenly, you're not just analyzing history, you're reconstructing it, bit by bit, frame by frame, a digital mirror to the past. Some scientists are already exploring this idea. They talk about quantum memory, how energy never really disappears, how particles might hold echoes of what they once touched. If AI could learn to read those patterns, it might become something like a chronovisor, not a magic screen, but a neural network that sees time as a puzzle and solves it. And it's not all fantasy. Deepfake technology can already create lifelike videos of people who've been dead for decades. AI voice models can re-speak ancient texts in the original accents. Virtual environments are getting so advanced they can simulate entire ancient cities. Right now, it's entertainment. But what if it's a blueprint? The scary part is this. We might be closer to the Chronovisor today than we've ever been. Not because the Vatican built it first, but because the rest of the world is catching up. The difference is that this time, the technology won't be hidden in vaults. It'll be out in the open, available to anyone with the tools and curiosity to use it. And when that happens, the question won't be whether we can see the past. It will be whether we're ready for what we find. Because AI doesn't care what story you believe. It just shows you the data. And if that data starts revealing secrets we were never meant to know, then history, as we know it, might never be the same again. If someone handed you a device and told you it could show you any moment from the past, no edits, no lies, no filters, just the real thing, what would you choose to see? Think about it for a second. The entire history of the world, laid out like a movie library, waiting for you to hit play. Where would you start? Would you go big and watch the first humans light fire for the very first time? That spark that changed everything. Or maybe you'd pick something more personal, a moment from your own family's past, a decision your great-grandparents made that shaped your life in ways you don't even understand yet. The power to witness the truth, not read about it, not hear someone else's version, but to actually see it, changes the game entirely. You could stand at the foot of the pyramids while they're being built. Watch the massive stones move, not with guesses or theories, but with your own eyes. You could see who really built them, how, and maybe even why. Or maybe you'd rewind to the moment the Library of Alexandria went up in flames. Would you try to read the scrolls before they burned? Would you try to remember what was lost? Some would go to the birth of religions. Watch Buddha sit under the Bodhi tree. Witness the parting of the Red Sea. See Jesus speak to the crowds, or take those final steps toward the cross. These are the moments that billions of people believe in, fight over, build their lives around. To actually see them would change everything. For some, it would confirm faith. For others, it might unravel it completely. Then there are the mysteries, the things we were never supposed to know. What really happened in Roswell? Who built Stonehenge and why? What was Atlantis really like before it vanished beneath the waves? The Chronovisor, if it ever existed, could answer every one of those questions. No more speculation, just the raw, unedited past. And that's where things get personal. Because this isn't just about curiosity, it's about identity. What you choose to watch says something about who you are. Are you searching for truth, for closure, for meaning? Would you use it to solve a crime? To forgive someone? To prove a point? Or would you just sit in awe as the past played out, like a living dream? So really, this isn't just a story about a strange machine hidden in the Vatican. It's a question, a challenge. If you had the chance to watch one moment in time, one unchangeable, unforgettable event, what would it be? And when you answer that, you're not just picking a scene. You're revealing what you value most. What you wonder about when no one's watching. What mysteries still keep you up at night. So ask yourself, if the Chronovisor was in front of you right now, glowing, humming, waiting, what would you watch first? We're told the past is dead, that it's over, that it only lives in books, in broken statues, in fading memories. But what if that's not true? What if the past never left us? What if it's still here, all around us, waiting in silence, not because it has nothing to say, but because someone made sure we couldn't hear it? The Chronovisor, whether real or legend, dares to suggest that time doesn't vanish, that every moment, every word, every sound still echoes somewhere in the fabric of reality. And if that's true, then the past isn't lost. It's just hidden, not silent, suppressed. For centuries, people have tried to tell the world things it wasn't ready to hear. Thinkers, scientists, witnesses, rebels. Many of them were ignored, or silenced, or worse. Their truths were buried under layers of fear, politics, or power. Not because those truths were wrong, but because they were dangerous. Because once you let truth speak freely, you can't control where it leads. And that's what scares institutions the most. Not the facts themselves, but what people might do with them. The Vatican isn't the only one accused of locking away forbidden history. Governments, corporations, even entire cultures have done it. Archives kept sealed for decades, testimonies erased, artifacts lost before they could be studied. We're trained to think this is normal, that maybe those secrets were kept for our protection, but maybe it wasn't about protecting us at all. Maybe it was about protecting a story, a version of reality, carefully written, edited, and rehearsed. The truth is, the past has always tried to speak, in strange ruins that don't fit the timeline, in old texts that contradict modern narratives, in whispers passed down through generations. People know things. They feel things. That tug in your gut when something doesn't add up. That dream that feels older than your life. That story your grandmother swore was real but no one believed. The past speaks in moments like those. Soft, persistent, refusing to die. Maybe the Chronovisor was real. Maybe it wasn't. But the idea behind it is powerful. That time is not a straight road, but a layered one. That everything we are is built on things we've been told to forget. And that silence is not the same as absence. What if we stopped treating history as something frozen in museums? What if we listened harder, not just to the people in charge, but to the ones they ignored, the ones who vanished, the ones who were laughed at, punished, erased? Because the past is not quiet, it's not finished, it's not gone, it's humming beneath our feet, stitched into the light, hiding in the walls of old churches and the patterns of ancient songs. It wants to be seen, it wants to be heard, and maybe the real secret isn't the machine. Maybe it's the realization that we don't need it to wake up, we just need to pay attention. Because the past was never silent, we were just told not to listen. The biggest threat to any secret isn't a machine, it isn't a weapon, it isn't even the truth itself. It's curiosity, that quiet spark inside you that refuses to accept everything at face value. That tiny voice that whispers what if. It doesn't matter how old you are or where you come from. Once you start asking questions, you become dangerous. Not in a violent way, in a powerful way. Because the moment you start searching for answers, you take control of your own story. That's what the Chronovisor represents. Not just a machine that sees time, but a symbol of what happens when someone dares to look behind the curtain. The idea that maybe the past has more to show us. That maybe the official version of history isn't complete. That maybe we've been told only the parts that keep us quiet. Curiosity is what they fear most. The people who hold power. The ones who build systems to protect secrets. They don't need to lie to keep you in the dark. They just need you to stop wondering. They need you to trust the script, follow the rules, and never, ever dig too deep. But history belongs to all of us, not just to priests or politicians or professors. It lives in every question you ask, every time you read between the lines, every time you feel like something doesn't add up and decide to find out why. That's how truth is rediscovered, not in big dramatic reveals, but in little sparks, one question at a time. When Father Ernetti spoke about the Chronovisor, he risked everything. His reputation, his peace, maybe even his life. Whether the story was real or not, his message was clear. There are things we are not supposed to know. Not because we're not smart enough, but because we're not meant to challenge the structures that depend on mystery. But you're allowed to challenge. You're allowed to wonder why certain books were banned, why certain artifacts disappeared, why some voices were never allowed into the spotlight. Curiosity doesn't make you disrespectful. It makes you awake. They want you to think everything worth knowing has already been discovered, that the past is solved, that the future is already written. But that's not true. You are part of the future, and your curiosity is the key to unlocking everything they worked so hard to keep hidden. So keep asking questions, even the weird ones, especially the weird ones. Ask about Atlantis, about time machines, about forbidden science, about who gets to decide what's real and what's forgotten. Because the moment you stop being curious is the moment you give up your power. And make no mistake, that's what they fear most. Not rebellion, not revolution, curiosity. Because curiosity leads to truth, and truth, once seen, can never be unseen. The strange thing about stories like the Chronovisor is that they never really end. You think you've reached the final page. You think all the secrets have been told, but then something new pops up. A whisper in a book no one reads. A photo that doesn't belong. A name mentioned in an old letter. And just like that, the mystery breathes again. This story isn't over. It was never over. Because truth doesn't vanish. It waits. Maybe the Chronovisor was real. Maybe it wasn't. But the questions it leaves behind are very real. Questions about who controls the past. About why certain knowledge is locked away. About whether we're being told the full story or just a carefully edited version. And if you've made it this far, you already know what matters most. Not the answers we're given, but the questions we dare to ask. Because that's what keeps this journey going. Curiosity, wonder, the refusal to be satisfied with half the truth. When someone tells you the archives are sealed, ask why. When someone says the timeline is fixed, ask who fixed it. When someone says the Chronovisor was just a myth, ask who benefits from it staying that way. You don't need to believe everything, but you do need to keep searching. Read old books, watch forgotten interviews, visit strange museums, connect the dots no one wants you to connect. And if something feels off, don't look away. Follow that feeling. That's how stories like this come back to life. And while you're at it, subscribe. Not just to this channel, but to the idea that the world is still full of hidden truths. That somewhere, in the shadows of history and the silence of time, there are things waiting to be discovered. Things that could change everything. All they need is someone willing to look. This isn't just about the Vatican or secret technology. It's about waking up, about realizing that history isn't just what's taught in classrooms or written in textbooks. It's alive, twisted, protected, and sometimes rewritten. But only if no one's watching. Only if no one's asking questions. So be the one who asks. Share what you find. Talk about it. Don't let the story fade just because the final credits rolled, because the real story is happening right now. Every time someone clicks away thinking it was just a cool theory, the silence wins. But every time someone stays curious, the truth gets louder. And maybe one day, someone will find the Chronovisor again. Maybe it's already been found. Maybe it's being used right now. Maybe it's watching you, waiting for you to ask the next question. So ask it. Keep going. Because this story isn't over. It's just getting started. And the truth? It's out there, patient, hidden, waiting for you to find it.